Welcome to the Listening Well, the space where every story matters. I'm Shania, your host and therapist, here to share real conversations and anonymous letters from listeners who are ready to speak their truth or just share something that they want to tell. Some stories are spoken, some are written, all are worth hearing. Let's listen in. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode and into another story. We have a new guest with us as always. We have Michelle with us here today. Michelle, can you share a bit about yourself and what drew you to reach out to join the pod today?
Sure, I would be happy to. Well, my name is Michelle Steiner. I live in Pennsylvania with my husband Ron, our two cats, Jack and Sparrow. I am
Nice.
a
I'm also
writer.
in PA.
Awesome. Yeah, we live just
Yeah.
right outside of Pittsburgh. So, yeah.
Okay, we're like way on the other side. I'm on the I live in an area called like that's like the northeastern, but like way over.
Okay. Yeah. That's awesome. And I am a writer, I'm a speaker, and I'm a photographer. And I write about my life with having a learning disability. And I have a learning disability. I have dyscalculia, which is a math disability. And I have limited
Okay.
hand dexterity in both of my hands, and I have visual perception issues. And what inspired me to reach out to my story is to be able to your podcast is to be able to share my story, because I had a
Mhm.
lot of people that tried to limit me with saying what I could and what I couldn't do, and a
Yeah.
lot of people just are not very familiar on what learning disabilities are.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on to the show to share a bit more about you and what things have looked like. So, kind of getting into things, what do you feel is like a moment from your life or a specific story of sorts that is important to tell here?
I think one of the most important things that I had was whenever I was very young, that is when I got diagnosed with having one. When I was in kindergarten, that is what really started everything from a young age. Most people, excuse me, look back at their elementary school years and think, oh, those were so easy. But for me, those were the hardest years. And my
Mm-hmm.
teacher really noticed in those times that I was really struggling in the classroom. I had a great deal of difficulty with counting, anything math related, writing my name, tying my shoes. And she recommended that I get tested for having a learning disability. And sure enough, I have one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Have you ever talked with your parents about how they felt about that, if they were really open to the process and having you be assessed to get the resources that you needed?
My parents were wonderful during those years. They definitely were ones that got me, consented to getting tested to having one.
That's great. Yeah.
But I think it was hard for them at first because it was a surprise. I was
Mm-hmm.
struggling in preschool. Even my preschool teacher could see that. But to them, I mean, you can't see learning disabilities. So I think that was a real surprise. And I think it was hard because they did know people that did go through learning support classes or special education services whenever they were in school, and it wasn't a positive experience. So I think this was hard initially with hearing that. But what my family did do is they knew, I think when I was very young, that without those services, they didn't know how my school years were going to be. So
Mm-hmm.
they were 100% supportive of what went on with the school. I can remember I had the privilege of running into one of my first learning support teachers because I had to repeat the grade and a new school. And I had that chance to thank her. And she said, well, you did the work.
Oh.
But she also said, it was also your parents too, with a lot of your success. If your mom had a concern, she would call me. And if I had a concern, I would call them. And they went to all my
Mm-hmm.
meetings and they really supported me. And it was really important to educate about having a child with a learning disability. And my
Mm-hmm.
parents didn't expect perfect grades, but they did expect me to try. So we spent a lot of long, tearful homework sessions together, and they made me go to school. Even when they knew I was going to do well on a test or I was really going to struggle, and that helped to build a lot of resilience.
That's really great to hear. I know it can be hard for parents to learn that their child might be struggling with something, but they definitely did the right thing in, taking the
Mhm.
time and learning what you needed to be able to succeed in the way that you have. And what has that looked like throughout your years of schooling, like having a learning disability, having access to resources that you need to be able to kind of move through the different levels and challenges there?
Well, one of the things was when I was in elementary school and all throughout my years of school, I had learning support classes. Now, in the beginning, and accommodations. In the beginning, it was all learning support because I needed help in all my areas. But they
Hmm.
slowly found out I was really good at reading and writing. So I was placed in regular ed classes for science, social studies, and eventually all my other classes, except for math and
Nice.
resource. Yeah, and I had accommodations along with that too. I had extra time on tests. I had the test read aloud to me, and all of that really helped me to be able to learn and to set me up for success. By the time I was in high school, I was on honor roll consistently
Wow.
for about 4 years. So that was a real win for me. But my parents, they didn't try to create maybe what a neurotypical child that was off to college was going to do. So they didn't push AP classes. They
Hmm.
did want me to be in regular ed, English, science, social studies, where I could do, or history, where I could do all of those things. But as
Hmm.
far as math and a resource room, they definitely consented to that. And they didn't want to really push me to go into some of those classes. And what that did was that gave me enough of a challenge in the academics that I could do. I know science was definitely one of those challenges. But that gave me that challenge, that extra little challenge I needed to prepare me for
Hmm.
whenever I would go to college and I wasn't going to have all regular ed classes.
Hmm.
And I still got the support I needed so I could pass high school and did not have to go and take algebra or other courses that I just couldn't simply do.
Nice. That's great. So it sounds like you did have the opportunity to go to college and to
Mhm.
go to school in that way. So what did that look like getting accommodations there? Because I have heard that it's can sometimes be really difficult to get what you need when you get to that college level and you're kind of one person in a really big space trying to advocate for yourself.
Right. I know when I got accommodations, it was hard and it wasn't, I chose a school that had them. Not every college does. And
Okay.
not every school that receives federal. And I also was connected with an agency called OVR. So they paid for college. I was able to graduate debt free. And they also made sure that I had accommodations well, actually, I had to register with the office, but they would not pay for a school that they was not an approved vendor. So
Okay.
they really, and I had a caseworker at that point. Now at
Hmm.
the college, it was up to me to register for having accommodations. I had to be the
Hmm.
person that went in and registered for them. And I also had to get tested for having a learning disability before I could receive any of those again.
Okay.
And I think the hardest challenge though was the stigma that
Hmm.
surrounded them, especially when I was at community college. I felt the stigma from staff and from other students as well.
Mm.
I can remember people thought they gave you an unfair advantage or you were cheating. I can remember I asked a professor for a calculator in a class and she said, "Oh, we use our brains in this class, not calculators."
Wow.
I had a person, an advisor who told me that I was going to have limited job choices. And even whenever before I got there, the psychiatrist told me that I would most likely not go beyond community college. So there was a
Wow.
lot of negativity, and just my peers
Yeah.
in general, that you got the answers, and that just was not true. But I thought it was, and I thought, well, I don't want to have that, so I didn't use a lot of the accommodations. And that was a mistake. My grades that were already pretty bad were dropping even further. And when I
Hmm.
finally used them, it did work. I was able to pass my classes. I didn't do well in a lot of them, but I was able to pass. And then when I decided to go to university after I took a break, this time I had some maturity and I thought, all right, I'm going to carefully research a program to make sure it has the least amount of math and science possible and
Mm-hmm.
that has disability accommodations. And this time I used them. I had even more. I had a note taker. I took advantage of the extra test time. I did tutoring. And most importantly, I advocated for myself. I would go up to a new professor and I would say, hi, my name is Michelle. I have a learning disability and these are the supports I'm going to need. And most of them were so kind and helpful. Other ones, they didn't quite get the memo, but you'll have that. And my grades improved. I was able to make dean's list for a semester and I graduated with a bachelor's degree despite being told I couldn't do it.
Wow, that is really amazing and a testament to show like how much you can overcome the odds that other people place
Mhm.
on you. Like as a social worker and a therapist, it's extremely disheartening to hear like the spaces that you were going to like for help and support. Like your psychiatrist telling you that you can't succeed in school is ridiculous to me. And for people to create such barriers and support stigma, especially at community college. I went to a community college too. Like you're the school for everybody, like so that's really disappointing to hear, but I'm so glad that you went your own track anyways, regardless of what they said. Like even if that became part of your, your thoughts and what was taking place there, because it is hard to receive some of those things. But I'm glad that you
Mhm.
believed in yourself anyways and accomplished such a huge accomplishment. What was that like for you to kind of go from being in a space at a community college where they were really disenfranchising for you, to going to university and saying like I'm going to show up for me and I'm going to do what I need to do, like regardless of what you guys might think.
Right. I think at community college, I wasn't that mature too. I believed what people told me. I didn't have that
Hmm.
uh, thing to think, okay, is this going to be true? Or is this going to be something that isn't? Or how do we handle it? I didn't know how to do that. And when my
Hmm.
professor was telling me that I was going to have the limited job choices, she gave me the example if we were going to do an art project, I wouldn't know how much paper to give. And she wasn't incorrect that would be a challenge for me. But what they didn't show me was, well, how do we work through that situation? And the only way that I
Right.
was able to work through that is when I was hired for jobs and childcare's, some of them were temporary jobs and part time. And I had to work through that. I had to realize, okay, I'm going to make a mistake sometimes. I'm going to maybe
Hmm.
have to check my work. I might have to ask for support. I might have to ask for accommodations. It's not that I'm going to go into a situation and it's going to be easy for me. I have to work
Hmm.
for a lot of what I do, but it's
Hmm.
how we handle that. And then once I got to once I got to university, I realized if I did not get an A on a test or if I got a D in a class, it wasn't, or a D on a test or a paper, or I didn't do well on something, it wasn't the end of the world. The best thing
Right.
you could do was, yeah, talk to your professor, figure out if this person's even going to work out for me and seeing what other options can be out there too. But it wasn't the end of the world. It was disappointing, but I had those resources that I knew I could go and be able to use. And it's not to say it wasn't a struggle. There were classes. It wasn't a surprise. Math classes were hard, but I also knew what to say no to as well. I can remember when I
Hmm.
was first doing my scheduling for my first semester back, and I told my advisor, I am not good at math. And he said, well, why don't we put you in chemistry? And I looked at him and I said, absolutely not. And
You
I think
made
he
it
looked really
easier.
shocked when, and then it turned out I didn't even need it. When I came back in, I was all worried about a science class. And he goes, oh, you don't even need science. And I'm thinking, okay.
Great, great. So
Yep.
going into like the workforce and graduating with your
Hmm.
bachelor's, what did that look like? Because I'm sure it's kind of a whole new space with working and trying to manage having a learning disability. And sometimes workplaces can be welcoming in the way that they're supposed to, because legally they're supposed to provide accommodations, and some places might not be as open and willing to do the same kind of thing.
Well, I think one of the things that it was hard after graduation was I had the confidence, but not every place was disability friendly. I worked at some
Mhm.
jobs that claimed that they were, but they were anything but that. And it took me, and so things didn't work out at those jobs. And it did take me a while to find the job where I'm at now. I work in a school with students with disabilities as a teacher's aide.
Oh,
And
nice.
yeah, and being that at the school, I I do feel I find it very rewarding to work with students, definitely, that have disabilities. I think sometimes that is just so helpful because I know where a lot of them are, and
Mhm.
I'm very lucky to have a great working relationship with my employer. I I am very confident in saying, I always tell the kids and the staff that I work with, do not ask me to help with math because I cannot do that. And for the most part, they are understanding. We've had a working relationship. It's not to say that there haven't been times where we've had to work out situations and just be able to explain that. But really, it's about me having that confidence and knowing how to explain, maybe not complain about things to be able to get the results because people can look at me and they don't know I have a disability.
Mhm.
So I have to explain to them that I can't help out with math and certain things might take me a little bit longer to do. And then sometimes I can laugh things off too. I mean, sometimes I don't have to go into that whole thing. I have a disability, especially
Mhm.
whenever they might be doing a crafting class. And I don't really want to go into, okay, why my hand dexterity makes it hard for me. I might just say, okay, I didn't have much luck with doing that. And really just encourage the kids to do that. So
Mhm.
I think it can look different depending on the situation too, but it's also just finding the right people and being able to go through the process to ask for accommodations is so
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, and I'm sure even for the children that you're working with, that it's really inspiring to see someone that they can resonate with. Because a lot of times we may work in spaces where people may like look like us and things like that, but they might not really get what we're going through. And seeing you and being a teacher's aide and being like successful in that way, I'm sure is really inspiring to them, knowing that while hopefully I hope that in today's age that people are
Mhm.
more supportive and that they're not creating barriers for people when they don't need to be there, that they know that they can overcome what their disability may create in terms of challenges, and that they'll be able to be successful too.
Exactly. I think that's important because a lot of times I get students that maybe aren't comfortable with talking to the teacher or things, and I'll tell
Hmm.
them, okay, I'll go with you, I'll support you, but you have to learn to advocate for yourself because
Yeah.
my theory is my students one day will leave me, and I hope and pray every dream they go after comes true. But for so many of them, their disability is going to be there. So I want to teach them how to be
Hmm.
able to handle it now.
Yeah, yeah. And is there any advice that you could give to parents with children who may have a learning disability, like whether they are new to navigating what that looks like or have been doing it for a while, in terms of what they can do that would be most helpful for supporting their children?
One of the things that I would definitely say is to explain what their child's disability is to them. A lot of times parents are hesitant because they don't want their child to be labeled or think they can't do anything. But I think it's so important that their child knows what disability they have and what to do to help themselves at that age. I know my mom and dad explained to me in simple age appropriate terms that I have a learning disability and that I learn differently, and they didn't let it make an excuse for anything in my life, but they also made it where I had to be the one that knew what I was getting myself into before I got into
Hmm.
certain situations.
Okay, okay. I think that's extremely helpful.
Mhm.
And are there any particular resources or places that people can go to maybe learn more about getting their children connected to services, or just kind of like a guiding point for folks that might be new to what that experience looks like?
Well, one of the first sources I would probably tell a parent is to talk to your child's teacher or even their pediatrician because they can have some referrals. If you have a very young child that you think might have a disability, or you just might want to make sure, there are early intervention services that people can do,
Hmm.
go. from birth to 3, and you can have your child evaluated and you can see, okay, is this a learning disability or is this just maybe typical? And there's services that if your child does have a disability that can be helped as well when they're young. I also think that there's the National Learning Disability Association is great for that. Just a lot of places that can give you that information about, well, what is it to have a learning disability and how can you help your child. Project Eye to Eye is another great uh, mentoring group where they can go in and work with students that have disabilities in the classroom, and it's other people that are in college with disabilities mentoring young students.
Nice. Thank you for sharing that. I'll be sure to link all of the different resources that you shared in our show notes. And
Okay.
then, aside from your parents being there for your journey, was there any other people kind of in your life that were strong support systems to kind of help uplift you and support the advocacy work that you were doing for yourself and for others too?
I have really been blessed with a great group of friends. I can remember whenever I was being bullied in school, I wasn't making a connection. I figured that out by high school. So I found some people outside of my school district. I had a art group that I started out with, and once I that was for teenagers, and once I transitioned out of that group, I found an adult writing group, and
Oh,
they were the
nice.
ones. Yeah, just a couple years older than I was, and they encouraged me to write about having a learning disability. And I said, "Oh no, that's too personal." And when I finally got that courage, yeah, I wrote some really bad poetry and some other things I wouldn't want to read today. But over like 30 some years later, we're still meeting once a month to talk about our writing and we're in each other's lives.
Wow.
And when I was struggling at school, they couldn't fix the problem. But the one thing that they could do was they could be the one that just was my friend. And I think that is so encouraging in life. And I also had a student teacher whenever I was in school that told me when everyone else was saying that I couldn't go to college, she said, "You can go to college. You're a hard worker. You know how to study." And I can't remember her name, but I wish I could. But her voice is what got me through whenever things were really
Oh.
difficult in school.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that goes to show like how much teachers or support
Mhm.
people in school settings, especially with working with young kids, just the power of the words that we say, whether that's a good thing that carries with us or something that is not so great too. So I really appreciate you for highlighting that. And if there's one thing that you hope that listeners take away from your story, what would that be?
The one thing I would hope that listeners would take away is to have that hope and that success is possible. Things do get better. And it's just one of those things that things do. And I wish I would have known that whenever I was younger because I would have saved myself a lot of anxiety. And also, the success doesn't always come in the package you expect. Sometimes it comes in something even better.
Thank you. And whenever we have a guest on the show, we have them leave a question for our listeners and the next guest to think about. So, for you, what would that question be?
My question that I would leave people is what is it that what are your dreams? And and what is your plan for finding a way to make that happen?
Well said. Well said. I think a lot of times we kind of get swept up on what we have to do. So to
Mhm.
take some time to think about what your dreams are and knowing that they can happen is really inspiring. So our previous guest that was on the show shared a bit about what her journey looked like, and a lot of that had to do with creating like a lifelong impact on people in a positive way. So, her question to you is, what is one thing that you have done in your life that has the ability to leave a lifelong positive impact on someone?
I think what I've done in my life is my advocacy work has been what I has making an impact. Whether that's I'm
Hmm.
working with a student and I'm just encouraging them in the classroom, and I think that makes an impact. I know a lot of times I remember there was a student that was really struggling last year, and he said, "When am I ever going to use all of this?" And I said, "Well, you may not use this someday, but." in the future, I mean, you don't know, but right now you need to be able to have that information. And that student,
Hmm.
anytime he struggled in the classroom, he would be him. We knew it was okay. He knew I was a safe person to be able to go and talk to and be able
Yeah.
to help him with his work as long as it wasn't math. So I think that's a key place that I can do that. A lot of my students seem to know that I struggle. And I think sometimes that helps with that advocacy. And I also
Right.
think through my writing, I also want to be able to help other people as well. I think I've had people that have said, wow, I thought I was the only one that struggled with that, but now I know that I'm not
Wow.
alone. And I think that that is what I want to help with people too.
That's huge. And can you share a little bit more about what your writing looks like and how folks can maybe find what you have and find some connection with the work that you're doing?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I write mainly creative nonfiction, and I write
Okay.
about my life with having a learning disability, and I tie it in with analogies with nature. So I might talk about the thorns of having a learning disability, or I might talk about how my disability is a flower that is blooming. And I make that simple enough so people can understand what I'm saying that have disabilities, and other people that don't have them, maybe have family members that do that, can understand that. And I also incorporate my photography. I'm not able to drive because of
Oh.
my disability. So on my
Hmm.
walks, I get that chance to stop and notice details that other people would miss. And I get a chance to literally stop and smell the roses. And I get that. Yeah, so I get to take a picture of a flower and I can post it on my blog or on my or some of them have gotten published. And sometimes I incorporate that with my writing as well. And rather than being sad that I don't have a car or driving, I'm thinking there's so many things that I would miss if I was in a car focused on the road.
I think that's so beautiful, really focusing on like what is in my reach, what is in my capacity rather than maybe what's outside of that. And I feel like that's something that a lot of us like as humans struggle with and trying to find like the good things about what we have in our reach and what we have going on. So I love that. Taking a moment to appreciate what's available to you in those moments.
Yes.
So I appreciate you so much for coming on to the podcast and sharing more about you and shedding some light on a topic that many of people might not be aware of. And I really hope that this opens up a space for people to learn more about learning disabilities, whether they have one themselves or know someone that does too. Any last things that you would like to share with our listeners for them to kind of walk away with?
I would just love to encourage people to be able to go after their dreams and to be able to find a way to do that.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And you have shared so many resources, and as shared always, they will be linked in our show notes. And I look forward to any conversation that takes place on our Spotify comment section. Same thing for YouTube. I appreciate you for coming on and for our listeners for tuning in. I hope that you all stay well and be well until next time. Thanks for joining me at the Listening Well. If you have a story, a secret you've never shared, or a question you'd like advice on, or just something that you would like to share with somebody else, you can send it in anonymously if you wish at the email thelisteningwell25@gmail.com. Every story matters here, and I can't wait to hear yours. Until next time, keep listening and sharing.